Hello and welcome to another Doctor Who Big Finish review. Yes, today I'll be looking at another companion chronicle, but this companion chronicle is a little bit different. You may recognise the name, Quinnis. Now if you're familiar with the story The Edge of Destruction, in part 1 Susan mentions Quinnis, and you see a picture of Quinnis on the scanner because of part of the TARDIS log where the TARDIS tracks where it's been on its travels. I think that's what it is from my memory. So I thought this would be quite an interesting one to review. So the days before Totter's Lane, Barbara Wright and Ian Chesterton. So I thought it would be quite a fascinating one to review. And of course, big finish to the opportunity of seeing a line or a little throwaway line within a story and going, you know what, we'll make a story about that. And that's exactly what Quinnis is. A story what we never saw, but Big Finish thought, you know what, we'll give you that story. So without further ado, let's look at the presentation. So taking a look at the presentation for this release, we have Susan there, we have one of the weird structures of the town of Quinnis, then you have the mountains, then you have one of Reversible, then you have the first Doctor banner there. The side of the release, the back of the release, so if you want to know more about this story then you can, and the total running time being so taking a look at the leaflet, we have a writer's notes by Mark Platt, then we have producer's notes by David Richardson, and a cast photo of the people involved in this audio. We have credits, advertising for Doctor Who magazine, and the reversible cover if you want the William Hartnell. The disc art is essentially a monochrome third Doctor So what do I think of Quinnis? Now Quinnis has been one of those audios what has intrigued me for a long time, since it's one of those handful of stories where it's set before an unearthly child. Obviously this is probably the most standout one because obviously this gets a mention in The Edge of Destruction and it gets a little mention in the PDA book Devil Goblins from Neptune. So did this story deliver? Answer, yes, Quinnis is a very enjoyable audio which really does utilise Susan and exploring the early days with travelling with the Doctor. Part 1. Now the story starts off rather interesting as it's with older Susan, which sort of references Unearthly Child, the 8th Doctor audio what was written by Mark Platt, where we see Susan reunite with the 8th Doctor, so it kind of plays off that and dealing with the aftermath from that story of Alex being shaken up by meeting his great-grandfather and the TARDIS. But you don't need to listen to that story to understand it, as it's pretty much self-explanatory within this story. So we have more detail on the aftermath of the Dalek invasion, but this section very much acts as a segue with Susan being worried about Alex, with Susan looking back at her childhood and remembering what happened when she was his age, with having the chance to travel and look at the stars. However much her grandfather made the choice for her, he was right to make Susan stay on Earth. You know, travel can broaden the mind, but it also can lead to trouble and danger too. So we have Susan thinking the same. So we have a really nice parallel with the Doctor saying to Susan, you know, you need some stability and friends your own age and not travelling with an old buffer like me, which is quite nice. So this is when we lead into the actual Quinnis adventure itself. So this is quite nice because obviously we start with the Doctor learning the controls of the TARDIS, and of course the TARDIS's Chameleon Circuit isn't broken, so it blends into the background and becomes a kiosk. I think the strongest thing about Quinnis is the world, because I feel like Mark Platt paints some beautiful imagery, with this being set in the 4th universe, which doesn't run parallel to our universe, so it means you can be a little bit more adventurous with the things what you do, with such as the air being like pepper and it being this sort of market town. And the sound design really does make it feel very immersive with the hustle and bustle of the strange items being sold. But then we move on to the structure of this town, which is essentially these half-finished bridges, you know, which are overarching each other and sort of look like a lattice, really. You know, the houses are all chained up, but all is not well, as the land is desiccated with them waiting for the rain. And of course, the Doctor being a man of science, he's roped in to make it rain. But of course, we do have some interesting questions raised within the story. You know, what's down below in the town? Why is it not safe? And when the rain does finally arrive, why will misery follow? Now, this part also does build up the sort of monster of the story, the Reversible, because you sort of get a glimpse of them at sort of the bottom of the town, you know, with their sort of weird, jagged movement, which I think Mark Platt describes beautifully within the story, making them feel very unsettling. And when they finally do appear, you really do get sort of the fear factor of them, which is rather nice. And the final 5 minutes of this audio is just really gripping. And part 2 is very much a part what plays a lot of tricks on you. It's one of those parts what just keeps on twisting and turning, which makes it quite enjoyable to listen to. The story continues to expand on the society of their technology and shows how dangerous the ground level is. We do have a few grim moments scattered throughout this part as well, with the sound design really helping, giving it this very eerie, unsettling feeling, especially when Reversible appear. And speaking of Reversible, they come into the forefront of this story, which they really expand on rather nice, and I think they're a very interesting concept, and I don't really want to talk too much about them because, you know, this story does really, you know, flesh them out. They become very rich creatures, and I think that's best for you guys to discover if you want to pick up Quinnis themselves. But the resolution for this story is just full of wonder, it's full of action and tension, and the ending is just really beautiful. You have this really nice, beautiful, sweet moment between the Doctor and Susan, and of course that leads to them arriving in 1963. The Doctor, played by Carole Ann Ford. Now, Carole Ann Ford really does capture the spirit of the first Doctor. Carole Ann Ford's audios, in my opinion, probably the most audiobook Companion Chronicles, because she literally just reads the story. But however, this one, she actually does some various voices, which in my opinion, when you're doing a Companion Chronicle, it's kind of vital that you give life to these various other characters. It just makes the audio pop more and become more alive, in my opinion. Now, Mark Platt really does capture that sense of wonder the first Doctor has, you know, that he's out in the universe and he's just so excited to explore it and just see the wonders of it, which is absolutely beautiful because he is a man of science, so this is quite fascinating as well. Also, this story shows the grandfather caring nature for Susan he has, and we do have some great moments, especially in part one. Part one is very much the first Doctor's episode, really, with him being quite mocking and rather confrontational, but the way the first Doctor resolves this situation is rather nice. It just creates some great imagery with the first Doctor with this kind of rocket launcher thing, which that's all I'm going to say, but it's a great imagery of like the first Doctor in this sort of handcrafted helicopter and a rocket launcher. It's a very interesting conclusion, which I just think is full of wonder. Susan, played by Carole Ann Ford. Now, this is a brilliant story for Susan, especially in part two. Part two is very much Susan's episode within this story. Because obviously part one's, you know, setting up this story and the Doctor doing his thing. So part two is when Susan really, you know, comes into her own within this story. And this story certainly just put her through an emotional ringer. We do have her, you know, worried for Alex, so she's very much mirroring the Doctor at the start. You know, we see her caring nature with her, you know, comforting Meadler. And it's interesting to see Susan so helpless and vulnerable. You know, what happens if you take the security of the TARDIS away and the safety of her grandfather? You know, how does she manage? How does she cope? And I think that's a very interesting theme what this story plays with. And I think Carole Ann Ford does a brilliant job bringing all those aspects to life. Meadler, played by Tara Louise Kay, a very odd character, you know, a character what foreshadows events. You know, she talks in riddles, and a character you do pity, but she's full of mystery. A very interesting character what does have a interesting twist, to say the least. So what do I think of Quinnis? Well, overall I think Quinnis is a simple tale exploring the early days of the Doctor and Susan's adventure, with this story really capturing the spirit of adventure with them not being tied down on Gallifrey. Quinnis is an interesting planet to visit, and I love the fact that Susan's humanity is what gets them into trouble, not the Doctor's meddling. The story world, I think that I love the world setting, the whole buildings, you know, these sort of half bridges, where they're all sort of overarching each other. You know, I can really imagine, you know, the 60s crew sort of doing sort of models of them, you know, very much reminding me of the White City from The Chase. I can just see that working beautifully as a model. You know, and I think that the story really captures the ambition and the sheer creativeness that 60s Doctor Who has in abundance. Now, this story is full of twists and turns, and Quinnis certainly keeps you on your toes. So Quinnis, I really like. I think that it's definitely worth looking into. If you love 60s Doctor Who, then it's definitely an interesting one. And if you want to know more about the Doctor and Susan's early days of travelling, then this is definitely a place to go to, because obviously it was referenced in The Edge of Destruction, so that certainly might pique your interest, and it certainly is an interesting one to listen to, just to hear those sort of the early days of the Doctor and Susan, in my opinion. So I'm going to give Quinnis a 8 out of 10. It's a very interesting story, which I really do like, and like I said, this story really does capture the sheer ambition and creativeness of the 60s Doctor Who. It is just full of wonder and, you know, just the heart and soul of what a 60s story is. Creativity, ambition, and the spirit of adventure. So Quinnis, beautiful story, and again, another brilliant Companion Chronicle in the Companion Chronicle range. So there we go, that's my review of Quinnis. I hope you have enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. So thank you very much for watching this review, and I'll see you next time. So thank you very much, and bye bye.